Good morning. Welcome to episode 26 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the water well and industrial drilling industry. Episode 26 is brought to you by TDH Manufacturing. TDH pump hoists are built to work as hard as you do, made with the latest technology to deliver the power and precise handling required on today's job sites. TDH will provide superior performance and unmatched versatility day in and day out. I want to thank Team TDH for helping the Driller bring you the news for the month of August. I'm your host, Brock Yorty, and this week in the news, we'll cover the U.S. Department of Energy's Frontier Observatory for Research in Geothermal Energy, the FORGE project, which is a field laboratory that has just announced a $44 million investment for projects to develop and test technology for fostering innovation in enhanced geothermal systems. Next, we're going back to the Colorado River Compact because the Bureau of Interior has replied to the Colorado River Compact states as that August 16th deadline passed. Our final story of the week is on capturing excess water and sending it to water-stressed states. But before we jump into news, let's talk some safety. For this week's safety topic, I want to talk about fire prevention on our drilling projects and service projects. The National Safety Council has an excellent fire prevention for construction resource sheet. On drilling and service projects, we must consider all operations that include hot work or could be a potential for fire. We need a fire protection plan that includes effective fire prevention and extinguishing plans. These plans should be put into practice as soon as a project begins and should be closely followed throughout the course of the job. The local fire department should be made aware of construction plans and should be kept up to date during the course of construction regarding items such as access to the site during both working and non-working hours. Periodic site inspection should be conducted by a person responsible for fire prevention and control. It is essential that this individual making the inspection is competent in hazard identification as well as corrective measures required for elimination or control of all these hazards noted. The fire prevention inspection report should be utilized and include an inspection form that gives us a checklist of everything from fueling that gasoline pumper to understanding what would happen if our compressor flashes or if some materials get ignited on site as we're doing hot work with welding. Workers responsible in a fire emergency situation should have appropriate training. All workers on site should be aware of the procedure for reporting a fire and evacuating the worksite. These procedures should be posted in prominent areas. All workers should be trained concerning these procedures. Some of our workers on each work shift should be trained in proper use of portable fire extinguishers. Training should address the 4 classifications of fire, the type of extinguisher suitable for each class, and the proper technique to be used in operating each type. Extinguisher suppliers or local fire departments may be willing to provide and assist in this training and education. What do we do when there's a fire? First thing we do, we notify the fire department. Then, trained individuals can utilize extinguishers to put out small initial fires. This is very important because we're not trained firefighters, not all of us, or we're not volunteer firefighters, and we need to understand what we can control and what we can't. Again, our teams must be trained on proper type of fire extinguisher and classifications. Compressors can flash. There's lots of ignitables. There's all sorts of things we're doing on these jobs. We need to be understanding what's happening. We need to understand the impact of extreme weather and droughts and heat and fuel types and be safe. Put a plan together. I know sometimes we're only on jobs for 8 hours or even 4 hours for a service job, but we need to have a plan in place. We need to make sure we have fire extinguishers. We need to make sure that they are inspected and in good working condition. and that we can react effectively to save lives, property, and mitigate that total risk. Be safe. Last week, the U.S. Department of Energy announced a $44 million investment into the Frontier Observatory for research in geothermal energy. They call it FORGE. It's a field laboratory that works on projects to develop and test technology to foster innovation in enhanced geothermal systems. We're talking about hot rock geothermal. We're talking about hot water geysers being able to pump fluid in and return to create heat, to be able to run electricity. There's just so many opportunities here, and it's going to take all of the great work and equipment and men and women that have been roughnecking in fossil fuels and offshore and in the Marcellus Shale, and this is just another opportunity for us to use our expertise and equipment. This is what the Forge project's all about. Geothermal energy has the potential to provide electricity as well as direct heating and cooling to tens of millions of homes nationwide. While a small fraction of the United States' vast geothermal resource can be harnessed naturally, occurring hot water or steam, the vast majority is inaccessible without creation of human-made enhanced geothermal system reservoirs. That's drilling. That is fracking. That is everything that we as an industry are good at doing. The substantial and sustained investment in technology development is vital to the commercialization of these type of systems, which can significantly increase geothermal energy deployment and help the country meet its climate goals. The investment at Forge can help find the most innovative, cost-effective solutions and accelerate our work towards wide-scale geothermal deployment and support of all of our huge, ambitious climate goals for 2030 to 2050, that reduction in greenhouse gases that we have to do. Forge is managed by the University of Utah, and it's the Department of Energy's dedicated field laboratory for developing techniques to create, sustain, and monitor these enhanced geothermal system reservoirs. To simplify this process, it is to create human-made underground reservoirs to tap into geothermal energy that would otherwise be inaccessible. That's drilling. That's our big rigs. That's everything we know about roughnecking. After we reach these inaccessible areas, we inject fluid deep into the ground to naturally heated rocks that otherwise lack the fluid flow necessary to draw geothermal energy to the surface. Sounds a lot like what we do all over the country, doesn't it? The sites use testing and R&D to reduce uncertainty and manage risk for commercial development of geothermal technologies. And again, if we think about this, we know that drilling equipment is high capital expenditure, and we know that drilling is very high risk. And to be drilling high pressure, high temp holes takes a lot of expertise. It takes a lot of great mud engineers. It takes a lot of great company men. It takes good men and women running the controls, roughnecking on those rods. This is a big deal. That's $44 million more that we've just invested into the geothermal industry and the drilling industry. It's nearly impossible for us to have a driller newscast that we don't talk about the Western drought or the Colorado River Basin states. And our last episode, we talked about how the deadline had passed and the states had not come up with a plan. On August 16th, the day of the deadline, the Department of Interior announced urgent action to improve and protect the long-term sustainability of the Colorado River system, including commitments for continued engagement with impacted states and tribes. The Bureau of Reclamation also released the Colorado River Basin August 2022 24-month study, which set the annual operations for Lake Powell and Lake Mead in 2023 in light of critically low reservoir conditions. we've seen both Powell and Meade the impact, and we have electric production. We have 40 million individuals that rely on that water. There is a lot going on there that we need to understand and continue to fight as we look at the prolonged drought and low runoff conditions accelerated by climate change, which have led to these low water levels. Over the last 2 decades, the department leaders have engaged with the Colorado River Basin partners on various drought response operations. However, given that the water levels continue to decline, additional action is needed to protect the system. The Inflation Reduction Law and the Federal Infrastructure Law have $12.3 billion in aid for water and drought challenges and investment into Western water and power infrastructure. The worsening drought crisis impacting the Colorado River Basin is driven by the effects of the climate change, including extreme heat, low precipitation. In turn, severe drought conditions have exacerbated wildfire risk and ecosystem disruption, increasing the stress on the communities and our landscape. This came from Deputy Secretary Tommy Boudreau. The Department of Interior is committed to using every resource available to conserve water and ensure that the irrigators, tribes, and adjoining communities receive adequate assistance and support to build resilient communities and protect our water supplies. Every sector in every state has a responsibility to ensure that water is used with maximum efficiency. In order to avoid a catastrophic collapse of the Colorado River system and future of uncertainty and conflict, water use in the basin must be reduced. This came from Assistant Secretary of Water and Science, Tanya Trujillo. The Interior Department is employing prompt and responsive action and investments to ensure the entire Colorado River Basin can function and support on all who they rely on. We are grateful for the hardworking public servants who have dedicated their lives to this work and who are passionate about long-term sustainability of basin states, tribes, and communities. We continue to see tribes in all of these quotes because we are vastly overshadowed by there's another boat or a buried treasure or unsolved mystery that we're seeing with low water levels in the reservoirs when we have plenty of Native American reservations along with crops and industry and electric production that are impacted on this. And that's why we're continuing to see how we address everybody that is affected. Reclamation remains fully committed to working in a consensus manner across the upper and lower basins with tribes and with the country of Mexico. I am confident that by working together, we can achieve meaningful change towards a sustainable future for the river that serves as lifeblood of the American West. This is the breakdown of the basin-wide conservation annually that has been proposed, that will likely be executed. Arizona must reduce by 592,000 acre feet. Nevada must reduce by 25,000 acre feet. And the country of Mexico must reduce by 104,000 acre feet. 1 acre feet is 326,000 gallons. We understand that in order to get Meade and Powell productive, we need to hold back somewhere between 600,000 and 4 million acre feet. This is a big deal. We'll continue to see what the basin states come up with. Our main story of the week is on capturing excess water and sending it to water-stressed states. Social media, the internet has allowed us to become a global community that discusses the water crisis and climate change and everything that's happening around the world. With all of these discussions, we are seeing some very imaginative, outside of the box ideas on what we should be doing with this flooding, with extreme rain, How do we get more water to the water stressed states? And so we see these topics on how to combat extreme weather and droughts. And last week, August 22nd, weather was a major headline as massive storms created historic flooding events across the US. And all of a sudden, we get the skeptical scientists or the outside of the box thinking again going, yes, we got the rain. This is the first sign of ending droughts that's impacting all corners of the country. Sadly, as we look at the true science from the United States Geological Survey or NOAA, all of the groundwater science information that's out there, it's not how it works. It's not how any of this works. We have to consider that typically the ground can absorb 1 to 3 inches at a time, and we're seeing 7, 8, 10 inches come in on one massive storm. Our ground absorbs over days of a large storm track that comes through and is able to allow for absorption. We have historical flooding because of our 100-year storm studies, and that many of our infrastructure across the country is 80 to 100 years old, a lot like how our water compacts are 100 years old. Our data has changed, regardless if you believe it's an extreme weather event or if it's climate change. And this is happening in both rural and urban areas, especially in places near bodies of water. These impacts double down on drought areas. The soil is dry and hardened to absorb the precipitation. There's a great YouTube video from England right now from a doctor that shows 3 types of soil, and he turns over a 10-ounce glass of water, and you can see how quickly a saturated ground, something that's got great porosity, absorbs versus dry, hardened, desiccated ground. And that's why we see water release down rivers out into the ocean, including all of the farmland that we've tiled, that we've sent to trenches, canals, back to a river system, and then that water is also flowing out of our watershed. So we're seeing many people right now focusing their imagination on designing. We have engineers coming up with outside of the box concepts to capture runoff and send that water to water scarce regions. One of the big ones right now that we continue to see is the speculation of creating a canal from the Mississippi River to Arizona that would transfer excess water at 250,000 gallons per second to the west when we have extreme weather. How would that project work? Comes right back to our last news story of the week. The Department of Interior, the Bureau of Reclamation. Any large-scale project for mitigation of droughts in the U.S. would fall under the direction of the Bureau of Reclamation. While technically feasible, transporting surface water from flood areas to drought areas, it would face many challenges, including water rights, property rights, environmental impacts, and more. Think about it. One of our very first stories was a Supreme Court case between Mississippi and Tennessee, where Mississippi believed that Tennessee, Memphis, was pulling way more water than they should be, and that was Mississippi's water. And then we got into the equitable apportionment discussion. So, beyond the legality and moving this water out of the watersheds, we need this to be absorption. And obviously in droughts or places that we don't have green space where we can absorb, this water is running away. Federal infrastructure law has a ton of money focused on this, and we can see it with the EPA and the waters of the United States, things that we've talked about a lot on this newscast. Beyond that, there's the considerable expense of building pipelines and pumping the water. Think about Nebraska's canal that they're trying to design right now, that they've focused $50 million just in engineering to be able to capture their Platte River water that they share with Colorado. It's going to be a big feat. Not that it can't happen. We have to consider everything. But where do we start with this? One other popular theory that we continue to see is the utilization of desalination plants of pumping seawater. Desalination of seawater and desalination of brackish groundwater are incredibly expensive. It takes a lot of energy. And as we push that brackish or seawater through there, consider it like a residential reverse osmosis system or the local breweries that are running a reverse osmosis system. 3 gallons in is 1 gallon out, and we have 2 gallons of concentrated, undesirable effluent that we have to dispose of. So as we think about these expensive options, look at San Diego. They've already built a desalination plant, but more issues come up, as including the amount of power that it's requiring, where to store this, and the environmental issues of getting rid of that effluent. The cost estimates for projects like this vary, but the cost of rerouting new sources of water is often too expensive. So what is our viable solution? It's everything that we continue to see. It's water conservation. And that's back to what we just saw with the Bureau of Reclamation. They said Arizona will reduce by 592,000 acre feet. What is that in impact to Arizona right now? That's approximately 21% of the state's annual apportionment from the Colorado River Basin Compact. Nevada is going to reduce 25,000 acre feet, which is about 8% of that state's apportionment. And Mexico, the country, 104,000 acre feet, which is approximately 7% of that country's annual allotment. This is a big impact and reduction, and we just don't have the water that we're supposed to have after almost 24 years of drought. As of right now, California has not been required on any water savings contributions under the 2023 operating conditions. But where will we go from there? We'll just have to see. It's going to be about reduction and prioritizing how we use water. And we're seeing that with the enforcements of lawn watering. And you can see what Las Vegas has done to reduce that. But golf courses, recreational water is going to have to become a secondary. It may have to be something that we look at alternatives to be able to utilize that water. Right now, it's got to be for supporting the 40 million Americans, the Native American reservations, agriculture, which is very important to us, power production, and industry. It's a big topic. It's something that we will continue to cover. Thank you for joining us for episode 26 of the Driller Newscast. Check out thedriller.com and all of the great content that is coming out right now. Continue to be watching the news, the Associated Press, the Department of Interior, all of this legislation. We have Waters of the United States still going on. We're getting closer to Sackett versus the EPA for the Supreme Court. That's going to be a big piece. We need a fire prevention and protection plan that we put in. And it's time for all of us as groundwater professionals and drilling professionals to understand how important it is for us to be conserving water and educating all of those folks. And the next time somebody says, well, they just let all that water right out into the ocean as everything was flooding right up, or they let it go right down river, explain why that is the situation. Thank you to Team TDH for bringing us the news for the month of August. Every vision and feature that TDH has engineered is with one goal in mind: to enable the contractor to increase their revenue simply because their pump hoist is more efficient, safer, capable of doing more work for your company. Give Blake, Cade, Scott, Team TDH a call and find out how their technology and all of the great things they're doing, this hybrid pump hoist system, it's amazing. Let them help you impact your business. Thank you for joining the newscast. Have a great and safe week.